day, fam. Welcome to Simplexity, a conversation
podcast
where we take seemingly complex matters and attempt to make them plain and simple. I like saying that every single week.
It lets people know, what are these two guys doing?
I think so.
You know,
And I would just like the viewer or the listener to know that although I say that every single week, I think it sounds exactly the same.
it does. It's actually impressive how you're able to replicate it each week.
I appreciate that
Yeah.
because I've recognized the same impressiveness.
Very
So
good.
that's what I was commenting on.
Okay.
So I appreciate you pointing that out.
Yes. Well, I believe you've received enough recognition already for today.
You think so?
I do. I would like to recognize a growing portion of our audience.
Yes.
A surprising growing portion.
Very.
And that being the good people of Seattle. Isn't that?
That just had a great ring to it.
People of Seattle.
Yes.
Hello, Seattle. Are you guys missing Russell Wilson these days?
Ooh.
Shouldn't be, because
He's not playing well.
he's struggling.
He is on the struggle
Ready?
bus.
Broncos country. Let's ride. He's cringy. But Seattle, we do appreciate you. We're very pleased to hear that you've been tuning in.
Yes.
So if you're from Seattle, you're listening in Seattle, go ahead and DM us on Instagram or leave a little review.
Yeah. Because we're so grateful that we have a contingency out there that we were thinking about.
That, like they're like this little army that's forming.
I know. Actually, little squad of Simplexiters that we were actually thinking about taking our podcast on the road.
Yeah.
Getting an Airstream and just heading straight for Seattle.
I'll
Putting
tweak
it in a
that.
parking lot and just setting up shop.
in a park, maybe.
All right, that sounds better. So, today's a big one.
It is.
I've been really excited about this one because I know that the subject matter at hand is one that you personally are heavily invested in and very passionate about.
I am.
And that would be the subject of
Politics.
Come on,
So I'm a little bit of a political junkie. I enjoy it. I like history. I like politics. I like following it. I like being informed. I like weighing in.
right.
So yeah, we're talking about that today. It's be the fact that tomorrow is election day.
Come on, here we go.
So this is a timely
Let the
timely
madness
conversation.
begin.
But it's still on brand for us because politics.
Have you recently been getting a lot of political texts, ads?
You know, it's weird. I got one recently, but it was addressed to Crystal
Huh.
and asking about Crystal's opinion of various Kentucky-related races.
Very strange.
Not horse races, but I personally, Crystal has gotten some texts, but
Okay.
I-
Maybe your number was Crystal's old number.
yeah, it seems like that could be the case.
Okay. I have seen quite the increase in political texts. I don't know where they come from or who got my number. I don't believe anybody does, but I have seen
I don't
an
even have it.
increase. While at the same time, if you've driven down Route 2, there is an enormous amount of lumber being used to erect these signs of a million candidates that I don't know anything about and that I certainly won't remember when I climb into the ballot box. But anyway.
That was you're a very informed voter. I like it. We have a lot to talk about, I guess.
Yeah.
But with that being the case, because there are a lot of signs out, we decided to craft our own campaign slogans and signs.
Yes.
Really, this was our producer Becca's idea.
Yeah. That we went along with.
We went along with.
But
So
I
I'll go
regret
first.
now.
Mine's very simple. I'll make sure it's in the shot. Vote smart. That's what I would say.
That's good. Look at that shirt.
Don't.
There's nothing smart about that shirt. Hold on. Wait a minute.
I like this shirt. It's
If
a
there
good
was
shirt.
ever a discreditor,
Ugh.
it would be that shirt. Did Hannah buy that for you? Don't put that on her. Don't you dare put that on her.
She
You
approves of
own-
the shirt.
Oh,
She picked it out. I bought it.
Hannah. All right.
Take it up with
I
her.
digress. All right. Moving right along.
What's your campaign slogan?
My campaign slogan was Sammy Foster, just a nobody trying to tell everybody about somebody. So I wove mine more along the lines of my
Casting
life.
Crown song.
And hey,
That's very.
actually, so I just want it known for the record.
Is that your favorite band?
Watch your mouth. Let it be known for the record. And I'm sorry if this offends anyone. First and foremost, I saw that little slogan on somebody's Instagram bio, okay? And I stole it because I liked it.
Was it the lead singer of Casting Crowns?
Little did I know that it's the lyrics of a Casting Crowns song. I did not know that until Beck and Boots pointed that out. I would just have you know I don't listen to Casting Crowns. Nothing wrong with them or those that do. But me, not so much.
Me in my house.
I don't want that on me, Ricky Bobby.
Yeah.
You feel me?
Well, I feel like you've received enough backlash for your poor choice of campaign slogan.
Thank you for allowing me off the hook prematurely. That could go on and on, a little roast fest for me.
We
but
could go a little longer if you'd like.
I appreciate the graciousness with my terrible choice of slogan and how someone could have interpreted that as an endorsement for Casting Crowns. Nevertheless,
You're upsetting so many people. So much more so with that than with our political content, probably.
I believe so. But politics, nevertheless, have become a macro issue and a complex one, to say the least. All the more, this day and age, the political landscape that you and I find ourselves in have become rather intense and very, very divisive. I think in large part because we've lost our ability to simply dialogue.
Yeah. So we've lost our ability to dialogue without reducing our identity or the other person's identity to their policies, to their ideas. And so we can't have healthy disagreement. We can't healthily argue with each other, because if I'm rejecting your ideas or your policies, I'm rejecting you as a person.
Absolutely.
And so we just don't do it.
Exactly. You know, it's interesting. The Washington Post recently put out an article claiming that politics were the new religion. And that's really interesting because it has become such a superior religion in some people's mind's eye that is how they identify themselves. So you're identified rather with not just your characteristics, your personhood, your occupation, you know, the size of your family, but now you're more so identified according to what your political party is and or your affiliation. And this has even found its way into the church, where people's political religion has trumped their Christian religion. So they're quicker to state who they vote for or what political affiliation they have, more so than being a son or daughter of God. That is extremely dangerous, and one of the many reasons this has become so divisive. And so it has become a real relationship splitter. It's splitting families, splitting workplaces, splitting friend groups, splitting churches, all because of the intensity of politics and what we've made of it. When in fact, it really could be a vehicle for change and to the positive. We've just trended very, very quickly into the negative. And so people are left to sort of having to pick a lane politically as to how they're going to approach politics. So you have those that have become very apolitical and passive, so as to say, I don't want anything to do with it. Why? Because of the intensity of it.
Yeah.
And so
they've seen the damage that it's done, and I don't want anything to do with that. So
Exactly.
take a step back entirely.
Totally. And there's very plausible reasons that people ascribe to that mentality, because on the opposite side of that is then those that we would label extremists, those that are either extremists on the left, that would be like Antifa, and those that have demonized politics, or those that are on the right that are storming the Capitol on January the 6th and doing it all feeling very justified. Some are even doing it in the name of Jesus. And so the church has taken on an extremely poor PR because of those that claim to be both followers of Jesus and yet those that are extremists to the right. And then you have those that I would say are in the middle that are very passionate about politics because they see the beauty of a democracy and a republic, and that politics are the vehicle to change. Mm-hmm. Now, I just want to make this one point known, is that at the same time politics have become very divisive and very polarizing, there is a fundamental agreement that I think is taking place no matter your political affiliation. And that is that people are starting to realize that something by way of our nation, morally, ethically, just culturally, is fundamentally wrong. Mm-hmm. I'm not just talking about those of us that follow Jesus and have a biblical moral compass. Those that don't even ascribe to the Christian faith, but still have a moral compass, they know we are trending in a very dangerous direction. So when you're actually ascribing puberty blockers to 12-year-olds, mm-hmm. when you are advocating for genital mutilation, when you're telling, 12-year-olds, 13-year-olds, yeah, we affirm you in changing your gender. Just as it pertains to sexuality, people know, wait a minute, this is not right. This is not normal. This is in moving in a very, very bad way.
Meanwhile, they still believe in Santa Claus, but no, you can have this life-altering surgery now.
Yes, totally.
Change the rest of your life.
Absolutely. So I think that creates all the more urgency, if you will, that we should be weighing in, that we should pick and choose what legislation moves us in the right direction, that we should be very keen to what's being sold or suggested and the policies therein. Like post-COVID, never before have I been this interested in local politics.
Yeah, I've seen you walking around with signs, actually. Vote Foster. You're not even running, but,
Just a nobody trying to tell everybody
Don't say
about
it again.
somebody. Come on, somebody.
I know, that was the missing element of that slogan of you. Why didn't you add "Come on, somebody"?
Hey, I can always take it back to the lab.
Right.
Don't worry.
I think you got to go back to
the
the drawing
campaign
board.
is
not
not
the lab.
over.
Yeah.
But for a moment, what I would love to hear you on is a conversation that we've had offline, if you will. Mm-hmm. And that is one ingredient that really aids to this complexity. And that has a lot to do with those that I described as apolitical and passive.
Yeah. And by passive, you could mean simply taking the script of culture.
Yes.
Okay, this is how we vote. This is how I don't want to get too involved, so I'll just kind of go with what I see on Instagram.
You're exactly right.
Or what this influencer says.
That group.
Having talked about influencers a couple weeks ago.
Right on. And that complexity is rooted in a lie. And that is, as you said, this is the script that we're being sold. And that lie is that we've been told that empathy is the highest virtue.
Yeah. And when you say something like that, I need you to unpack it.
Yeah, totally.
I'm just kidding. I'm going to unpack it. When you say when you say something as jarring as empathy is the highest virtue, you do need to explain yourself.
Yeah, because there is a plausibility to that, or at least there sounds to be one.
Oh, it sounds good.
Yeah, it sounds really good.
Yeah, I don't know what it means though. No. So I want to do very quickly, kind of to flesh this idea out, two things. One, explain what I mean by empathy, common definition, common baseline, so that we're all on the same page. And then two, empathy is the highest virtue in comparison to what?
Yeah.
Again, it sounds compelling, but what are we comparing empathy to? So that first aspect, what do I mean by empathy? You listening, anyone who's listening right now probably has an idea in their head of, okay, this is what empathy is.
Yeah.
And that's fair. I'm sure that there are good aspects to that definition that each person's thinking about, even what you're thinking about right now.
Don't tell me what I'm thinking about.
I can read your mind. But what I want to do... Yeah, I am. I want to give the definition from what I would call an authority figure on the matter. This is Dr. Brené Brown.
Yep.
She is a sociologist. She put out a video a number of years ago on kind of the differences between empathy and sympathy. And in that, she explains what empathy is. I would recommend go ahead and watch it.
Yeah.
Right
Many
now.
people have, right?
Many-
I mean, there's millions
of people. And so that's why I cite it, not just because it's some random so-and-so, but this is a significant figure. A lot of views this is a culturally influential definition that we're about to get into.
And it would be important to note, this has shaped a lot of modern thought as it pertains to the idea around empathy and relationships. She was a big proponent of that.
Definitely. So I would recommend watching the video. I watched it. It is compelling. So it's a talk that she gave. But someone had taken it and animated like little cartoon animals to it to depict these different. Empathy was one. I think it was like an elephant. Sympathy, who's the bozo in the analogy, is an antelope or something. Anyway, I really enjoyed it. But there are some sneaky. I don't know if I agree with that.
Yep.
We can't necessarily accept this wholesale. So that's a lot of preface. We preface a lot, but here is how
Did a good job setting that up.
Yeah. This is how Dr. Brené Brown described empathy. 4 components very quickly. 1, perspective taking, listening to the person that you're trying to empathize with and accepting that what they're saying is the truth for them. It's their truth. So again, we talked about this a few weeks ago. It's that idea of subjective truth. Immediately, if you have an objective truth, or if you're a believer and you say, no, we claim to an absolute truth, there should be alarm bells that are beginning to ring there.
Exactly.
Number 2, you have to stay out of judgment.
Oh.
Yeah. We know Christians are judgy. We love to judge. What are you telling me to stay out of judgment? But what that means is not attempting to discern what is being communicated.
Right.
Just stay out of judgment.
Yep. Wisdom is not needed there.
Yeah. Leave wisdom at the door.
Yes.
Yeah. Number 3, look for and recognize emotions and feelings that the person you're trying to empathize with, that they are feeling.
Yes.
Not altogether. I don't think anyone would say that's a bad thing. Yeah, of course.
It sounds very caring.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it is in a lot of ways. And then lastly, we communicate and then reciprocate the feelings or the emotions that we picked up on in the person that we're empathizing with. I don't know how that holds up to the working definition of the listener now, or how you interpreted empathy before, but this has been such a cultural shaping mentality that this needs to be the baseline that we're working from, because so many other people, millions of people, are working from that is the definition of empathy.
And it's constantly being reinforced. So not only are millions of people working from that definition, but then there are millions of people that are promoting that definition. This is why you have companies and celebrities and politicians that are virtue signaling, because they know this is what ultimately has been sold us. This is what's being affirmed and advocated now. And so they've even left their own judgment, wisdom, and discernment at the door. They're just swimming with the flow. And so there is a constant reiteration of said definition, while at the same time, this is shaping the culture in which we live. For those that have a degree of wisdom and discernment and question, they have largely been silenced, or they're the outsider now looking in.
Yeah, because they've been told that to empathize, you need to set wisdom aside.
Right.
And it's funny, going back to what we talked about on the front end, as far as the inability to disagree, the inability to disagree with your ideas, your truth, if you will. Like you said, empathy, this definition of empathy enforces that.
Yeah.
In order to empathize with you, I need to see it the way that you see it.
Right.
We need to agree upon it. Otherwise, we have no connection.
That's exactly right.
So we established the baseline of empathy. I do want to very quickly compare, because again, we said this was the highest virtue. I want to compare it to what?
Yeah.
Highest virtue compared to what? And so to do that, I just want to list 4 that C.S. Lewis in his book, Mere Christianity, I was actually looking for it earlier. Couldn't find it in your office. care to explain?
You did not.
I did not.
I do have that book.
I figured you would.
I think everybody should have that book.
It's a great
and everybody does have that book.
Yeah.
Not everyone has read that book.
Everybody
Has read that book.
Yeah. But in that book, he talks a lot about morality, behavior, stuff like that. And in part of the morality portion, he talks about virtues. Mm-hmm. Okay. And he lists 4 what he would call cardinal virtues.
Yep.
Or everything kind of hinges upon these virtues. It's not in relation to Roman Catholicism.
Yes.
When I say cardinal.
Thanks,
but he,
Boots, for clarity.
Clarity's kindness. But he makes the point that these are not altogether Christian virtues, or you need to be, kind of what you were saying earlier, you don't need to be a Christian to aspire to these virtues or to value them as cardinal virtues. Right. He was saying these are kind of culturally accepted. These are the top 4.
Yep.
And so very quickly, those are prudence.
Yep.
It's kind of good thinking, reason, wisdom, discernment. 2, temperance. So that's someone of moderation. You're not given to vices. You haven't created idols, that sort of thing. Yep. Justice.
Come on.
Which is one that we hear about a lot.
Yep.
And we get it right sometimes. We get it wrong sometimes.
Right.
So it's justice according to who? Is it biblical justice, or is it justice as defined by culture? Yep. We need to weigh that out. We need to use prudence to do that. And then fourthly, fortitude.
Yes.
Which isn't a word that you hear altogether often, but it's kind of this idea of perseverance, courage, bravery. I would argue that those 4 things we do not highly value anymore. Mm-mm. Prudence, good ideas, reason. Honestly, good ideas and wisdom can be offensive.
Yeah.
Good ideas can be boring. It doesn't get clicks. You had talked about before how the news kind of feeds off of our fears.
Right.
Because it makes them money.
Absolutely.
And it gets attention. It's dynamic. Prudence, kind of boring.
Yeah.
Temperance, not being. We are hedonists in this culture. We don't care who you sleep with, how often you sleep. Like, do your thing. As if it feels good, do it. Like, that's kind of been our cultural mantra. So temperance, not something that we value. Mm-hmm. It's certainly not the highest virtue. Again, justice, according to who? Get it right sometimes, get it wrong sometimes, but we get swept into movement sometimes when it's not necessarily rooted in truth or justice as the Bible would define. And then finally, fortitude. Yeah, we're all for perseverance, bravery, and valor if we agree with your agenda.
Right.
But if I don't agree, I'm just seeking attention.
Yeah.
You know? And so I mentioned those 4 because, and you can think of your own virtue. Create your own virtue. Honesty. You could probably put honesty in with temperance.
Yeah.
We know that people lie to us.
Totally.
We accept that our politicians lie to us. It is not that you got to lie to get ahead sometimes.
Yeah.
It's not the highest virtue. And so the reason why I mention those is because we have come culturally to accept and tolerate when our friends, when our family, when the leaders that we elect or look up to, or CEOs that you talk about, celebrities, when they don't exhibit those things. Who expects a celebrity to exhibit temperance?
Right.
You don't.
Right.
We'll tolerate that. Hey, it's okay. Maybe ideally they'll have temperance. But the minute one of those celebrities or CEOs or politicians says something that could be deemed offensive or insensitive or lacking empathy, we will cancel them at the drop of a hat.
You know, I don't know if you saw this, but there's a call for, is it Luke Bryan, the country singer? Or is it Luke Bryant?
I think it's Brian.
Brian, yeah. And he was on...
If we're wrong, then sorry.
Yeah, sorry, Luke. But was he on American Idol? I believe he was, sitting next to Katy Perry for a season. Come on, Boots. Nevertheless, he went and did a fundraiser in Florida for those that have suffered great loss in Fort Myers due to the horrific hurricane that wiped out the downtown area, commercial buildings, residential, on and on and on and on. He simply went down there and stood next to Ron DeSantis, the governor of, and they are calling for him to be canceled due to his affiliation with the governor.
Because his affiliation could be deemed offensive to some
Absolutely.
people because of the policies or the ideas that DeSantis exhibits.
So think of the contradictory nature of how culture has sold us that empathy is the highest virtue, okay? And so the minute that somebody says something that either we disagree with or that we feel is offensive, we'll cancel them. But at the same time, we expect from them empathy for our views and for our policies and for our cultural norms or our degree of acceptance, but yet it's cannibalization, if you will. We cannibalize ourselves. Like we don't have any standard, everything's subjective, but yet we beat the drum for whatever virtue breaks in our favor at the moment, yet it does truly lead us to the feel of, as the scripture says in the day of the judges, that people only did what seemed right in their own eyes.
That is so accurate.
It is madness. Nevertheless, we do have this cultural norm where people are very loud proponents of empathy.
Yeah, and that's hurt us in two general areas. And I believe that Christians are especially susceptible to this overemphasis on empathy because it preys upon our natural inclination as followers of Jesus,
right?
Filled with the Holy. It preys upon our desire to be merciful.
Yes.
Our desire to show compassion, our desire to love our fellow man well. But the cultural script is, well, in order to do that,
yep. Here we go.
You need to do these things. But it can hurt us interpersonally.
Yep.
And I love this quote by John Piper, Pastor John Piper.
Yep.
He talks about this idea called emotional blackmail.
Yeah.
Good timing. And I'm just going to read this real quick. But it's a few pages. I'm just kidding. He says, emotional blackmail happens when a person equates his or her emotional pain with another person's failure to love. They aren't the same. A person may love well and the beloved still feel hurt and use the hurt to blackmail the lover into admitting guilt he or she does not have. Emotional blackmail says, if I feel hurt by you, you are guilty. There is no defense. The hurt person has become God. His emotion has become judge and jury. Truth does not matter. Again, empathizing,
right? Setting
aside truth. All that matters is the sovereign suffering of the aggrieved. It is above question.
So good and so clarifying. I mean, as to what we've adopted as a culture by way of empathy, that it is so imbalanced. It is so off, while at the same time, it can sound so right.
It does sound so right. And again, that can be both interpersonally or culturally. But then politically, we've seen this kind of what we were talking about on the front end. But there's a GK. I got another quote for you, a little GK Chesterton.
Okay.
He says, the glory of modern day people is that they really do feel.
Yep.
It's glorious. Their only danger is that they cannot think.
Come on.
So, and that's this idea that we keep kind of trying to come back to is to love, to be compassionate, to show mercy. You can do that, but you do not need to set aside wisdom, discernment, or truth.
Absolutely.
They need to coexist. Otherwise, we do see ourselves in a situation where we're affirming gender changes in children.
That's right.
Because we have set truth aside.
Yep.
Yes, we feel for them. We empathize.
Yep.
But we do not think. How will this affect them 20 years from now?
Totally.
We don't ask questions because to ask questions is uncaring and unloving.
You, as I often say, you do not need to sell your soul to love your neighbor. If you have a conviction, an inward constitution that you know something is right versus wrong, that something is...
Yeah, because to love is to will the good of another.
That's exactly
But
right.
we've missed that in our embrace of overemphasis on empathy to say to love is to empathize.
Yep.
Well,
Nope.
no,
No,
it's
it
not.
is not.
No, it is not, because what you are feeling might not be best for you. And to love you, I do need to will the best for you.
And this is exactly what we see in the life of Jesus, that Scripture describes that he came full of grace. He was compassionate. He was loving. He was empathetic. He was sensitive to people's needs, their trauma, their wounds, even their waywardness. Came full of grace. At the same time, he was full of truth. Not one more than the other, not one less than the other, full of grace and truth. Notice how I said not one more, not one less. That's exactly the same thing.
I did not notice that, but now,
I just wanted to see if you picked up on it, Boots, and you did it.
Didn't.
But he is not only the example, he's the model to follow. And that is that we are not gracious if we are not truthful, that they are not mutually exclusive, that I think grace is to disagree with people at times because we see something that would be better for them, not to remain radio silent because we simply don't want to disagree with them. That's the lie that we've bought, that it's not loving to tell somebody what's truthful. That's crazy. That's like the blind leading the blind.
Yeah.
And so what we are called to do is to use wisdom, to use judgment, to use discernment, and at the same time being compassionate and sensitive enough to say, I love you, but I'm going to have to disagree with you. I love how Jesus was constantly demonstrating that. I think even for those that don't, again, ascribe to the Christian faith, it is going to be hard for one to say that Jesus was not the most loving human being that walked the face of the planet. Human, but God nonetheless. He was divine, but took on human form and demonstrated the most perfect picture of love. And he was constantly disagreeing with his creation. And he did it in the most masterful fashion so as to lead them to where life was found and what he knew was better for them.
Yeah.
Not just to be confrontational or just to take the opposite side, but because he loved them, he was truthful with them. And we've lost that ability.
Yeah.
And so it really is what's created the divisiveness that we find now in politics.
Jesus, when he healed the man, the paralyzed man, and he tells him, take up your mat and walk.
Yeah. I wrote a book on that.
Ooh, what's it called?
Not to promote, but it's called Supernatural Change. You can go to Amazon and get that. I'm just joking. Stop it, Sammy. This isn't about you. But for real, you can reach out, and I can probably...
What if Jesus had only empathized with that man? Had
Right
only connected with where he was rather than where he wanted him to go. He'd still be lying on that mat.
Not today, he would.
Well, you're right. He's still there. Let's go visit him. No, you're right. He would have died on that mat.
2,000 years old.
Yeah, it's a miracle. And to your point about Jesus being full of grace, full of truth, another way to say that is full of justice, but full of mercy.
That's right.
St. Aquinas said, justice without mercy is cruelty, but mercy without justice is the mother of all laxity.
Wow.
Meaning anything goes.
Did you just pull that out of your hat? What was that?
I'm not wearing a hat.
Because I don't see you reading that off of anything.
Well, I read that beforehand. It's not on my paper, if that's what you mean.
All right.
But that's what we're seeing, the mother of all laxity.
Yes,
right
we are.
now.
Yes, we are.
Anything goes.
And it's very detrimental.
Yeah.
I would agree.
And just as a quick side note, you and I, we mentioned the idea of puberty blockers and gender changing surgeries on the front end because that's probably one of the most obvious examples of this concept that we're talking about.
Right.
But I would argue empathy has made its stake known on just about every social or political issue that we find ourselves talking about right now, and its ultimatums have been made clear as well. I mean, you look at something like COVID, which it's a little bit sneakier, but we were told certain things that you have to do or say you can't question
Right.
Or if you do, then you just don't care about people. Like that, there was no alternative to weigh in or to rationalize or to reason. You were simply just identified as unempathetic or uncaring.
Yeah.
And you can make the case for a number of other things that occur as well.
What would those other things be?
I would talk about Ukraine.
Yeah.
You can't question whether it's best to financially support that or sending billions of dollars over to the country. You can't
Right.
even question that. Otherwise, you don't care. You don't care about the suffering of the Ukrainian people.
Yeah.
Which, of course, as followers of Jesus, our hearts can go out for the people. We can be against, suffering. But you can also question: is this the best way to govern?
Right.
Does this make the most sense? But you can't even ask those questions.
Certainly.
You're either caring or you're not.
Nope. I think you make a compelling case, my friend, and one that certainly surfaces this dilemma that we find ourselves in because of the complexity of the lie that we've been sold, and that is that empathy is not the highest virtue. It is a virtue nonetheless, but it is not the definition that I think a lot of people have been told and are now being driven by. And so it truly is incumbent upon us, all the more as believers navigating a very complex landscape, to use discernment, wisdom, judgment, to look at everything. This is why Scripture tells us to be wise as serpents and harmless as doves, but to really walk circumspectly, understanding that there are constant schemes of the enemy, and many times he uses people to advance those schemes.
Yeah.
And so we don't get the right to resign ourselves mindlessly and just say, okay, we're just going to accept every cultural norm. So I couldn't agree with you more. That, however, does leave us with where do we go from here? With the issues at hand and the policies that are being presented and all of that, we do have to simplify.
Yes. Yep.
This.
We've done a lot to
aid the complexity.
Yeah.
Where we have explained why we believe there is a complexity.
Yeah, where the complexity comes from.
That's right.
But now let's help someone. Let's
Please,
help ourselves.
Let's help ourselves.
Yeah.
I need help.
Yeah, help
I
me.
really do believe, though, that in order to navigate these waters, it begins with, this is going to sound crazy, but just bear with me. It begins with identity. Like, first and foremost, you have to know who you are. For those of us that follow Jesus, we say often, it's only when you know who you are that you'll know what to do. So your identity has to be fixed. You have to understand that you're a king's kid, that you're a son, a daughter of the Most High God, that your highest identifier is the kingdom that we've been grafted into and the God that now rules over us, because he's the one that knows best for us. And so identity is so key. This is why if you don't know who you are, you'll allow a myriad of things to identify you, many of which could be lies.
Yeah.
And so...
Or what you said earlier about politics has identified us.
Absolutely.
That cannot be the ultimate identifier
Right.
of a child of God.
That's exactly right. And some would say, you know what, I'm not that invested in politics. I don't let it, define me. Well, then your tribe can identify you, or the group of people that you most relate with can identify you, or your affinities and your likes and your dislikes, when in fact, what should supremely identify us is the one that created us. And so this is why I think it's a very fundamental starting ground, but it's the starting ground nonetheless, that we must be clear on whose we are so we know what we do or what we're to do.
Yeah.
And so I believe that it does come down to that. It's when you understand that you'll know what to speak to. It's where to derive wisdom from, how to look at certain things, delineating truth from lie. That's all really rooted in identity.
So you say when you know who you are, you'll know what to do. What specifically to do?
Yeah, great question. And I would say, our identity determines our purpose. Okay. So as creation of the Creator, he's the one that gives us our purpose. We're fearfully and wonderfully made. So I think our purpose is that we are first and foremost agents of redemption.
which is a very cool title.
You like that?
That's actually a movie I'm working on.
It's like keep it. You can keep it. I don't want any claim to it. All right.
You might change your mind after you see it.
No, but the reason that I say agents of redemption is because it's distinct from agents of change. Like I think oftentimes we hear, I'm an agent of change, you know, I'm a culture shaper, I'm a world maker, not a world maker. Yeah. What is that?
God. Well, an agent of change, the change could be bad.
That's exactly right. Right. And the change that you attempt to make could be your own personal ambitions and aspirations. An agent of redemption is to redeem that which lost its God-given purpose, that you're restoring it to what God first intended. And so when Jesus said, hey, pray like this, our Father who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. That was a prayer of restoration, a prayer of redemption, that God would use his kids to accomplish that end. And so we are agents of redemption, redeeming that which has been lost or misused. And so I love that that's my purpose. I see that I have a lot of job security this day and age as things are rapidly growing darker and spinning out of control. I want to use my influence for a redemptive work. I want to use my voice for redemptive work. And I think I want to use politics for a redemptive work. So I think politics is an outlet for redemptive change. It's certainly not the only outlet. It's just one of many outlets that we can exercise our freedoms to make our voice heard, to be agents of redemption. So I want to use it as such.
Yeah, well, it's an extension. The same way that God is redeeming me personally.
Yep.
He's sanctifying my life. I'm becoming more like him. The way that he's redeeming the relationships that I'm in, my family.
That's right.
My job place. I'm working here, working under you. But politics is simply an extension of that.
Yeah.
In using your influence and using your relationship with God to redeem and restore and, frankly, make the lives better.
That's right.
Of the people in your community or in your state or in your country. It's a redeeming work and it's a restorative work. And as a child of God, it's our honor and privilege to walk that out.
I think, though, that it needs to be noted that as an incredible work as it is, it will largely be a combative work. Why? Because there is an enemy that wants to destroy that which God wants to make beautiful. And so there is always this conflict in being agents of redemption and agents that are trying to restore that which has been lost. Because Jesus came to make things better. Jesus came to give us life and life to the full. And so whenever you join him on mission, you're swimming upstream or going against the grain. And so the reason I think we must understand that it's combative work at times, and I'm not talking about combative like we're always fighting. We're not fighting one another. We're fighting a very real enemy of our soul. But it is at times controversial. Why? Because culture is against it. It is at times laborious. Why? Because many people don't approve of it. And so I think it's in that place that you have to understand, and I would say this is where I'd like to land this. You have to know who you're living for the approval of. I think oftentimes the reason that a lot of people bow out of being an agent of redemption is because it creates a little bit of a backlash and the disapproval of many. And so if you're living for the approval of man, oh my gosh, you're going to have a wind in your face. Why
would you weigh into politics?
Absolutely. Absolutely. That's the plausibility of going apolitical or becoming a pacifist.
Or simply following the cultural script.
You got it. I get it. You don't want the hate. But when you understand who you are and you understand what your purpose is, then you understand who you're living for. And I think that we do live for the approval of not just one, but the one that I want to hear. I want to hear at the end of my run, hey, Sammy, well done, thy good and faithful servant. You stood fast and firm in the faith. You upheld truth, but at the same time, you were gracious and compassionate. That you modeled what it was to live full of grace and full of truth. Now, I know I'm not going to live full of grace and full of truth, but I at least want to give it my best effort so that I can represent Jesus well, because ultimately we're called to live for the approval of him. And I think when you have those three sort of fundamentals on lock, it gives you a much greater clarity into the complexity.
Yeah, and I think it's worth noting that keeping those three things in mind is not a set it and forget it mentality. You need to be continually asking yourself, who am I?
For sure.
What's my purpose?
Yep.
And ultimately, whose approval am I striving for?
That's right.
And you should probably take that into the voting booth as well.
That's exactly right. Amen. I think that's a wonderful place to start. And this is a wonderful place for us to stop.
Oh.
You see how I did that?
We'll start and stop. That's good. That's good. A great place to stop indeed, my friend. And so with that, I would say if you enjoyed this podcast, go ahead and hit the follow button.
Come on.
Wherever it is.
Just hit it.
Just,
You know you want to.
yeah, it's calling your name for crying out
Yes.
loud.
Look at that little guy.
Yeah. Also, don't forget, we are on YouTube still. Point at the camera for me. Bingo.
Give a cam wave.
No, that's not what it looks like. That is not what it looks like. But we appreciate you guys listening, and we'll see you next week.
Love you guys.